Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast, where it's all about turning your job search into a slam dunk. Your host is Angela Copeland.
Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Angela Copeland. In the studio with me today, I have Amy Ware. Amy is the Director of Career Services at Christian Brothers University in Memphis, Tennessee. Amy, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Angela.
I know that you've been doing this for years at multiple universities. And so I'm just really excited to kind of share what you've learned over the years working with students with my listeners.
Yeah, great. Glad to be here.
So I guess let's start off. Can you kind of explain to me what sorts of job searching skills that you help your students with?
Sure. Well, we are a comprehensive career services office, which means that we work with students from day one, helping them choose a major and helping them learn more about who they are and what careers and areas of studies are the best fit for them based on their personality, their interests, and their skills and their values. But then from there, we definitely work with them on job preparation skills. Those range from resume reviews to resume preparations for those individuals that have never even begun to write a resume. Mock interviews, we record the students via our little camcorders on the computer, and we pretend to be the employer that they're actually going to be having the interview with. And so we do our research to ask questions that are going to be more accurate to what they're going to receive during their actual interview. And we make them dress up, and we record them, and then they watch themselves and obtain feedback. And students are always very excited when they leave the office after a mock interview because they feel so much more prepared having actually gone through the actual practice.
Oh, that's great.
And they get some feedback, and then we also work with them on just job search strategy techniques, how to create a LinkedIn profile. I'm always surprised at the number of students who do not have LinkedIn accounts. And so that's something that we'll work with the students on, how to network, how to conduct an informational interview, how to prepare a cover letter, how to upload their documents on Career Links, which is our career services system that connects students with jobs and internship opportunities, and how to network and get out there and be the most viable candidate that they can be.
Absolutely. So where do you find that students really get stuck when they're job searching?
Sure. And this is something that I've seen regardless of whether I'm at a private industry, school, or public. Students lack focus.
Oh.
And when students do not have focus on specifically where they want to go for their career, that's going to be the biggest problem. Because it's kind of like going to a ticket counter at an airport and saying you have no idea where you want to go. Students, and any job seeker for that matter, has to have direction. They have to have goals. They have to have a focus, because if you don't have that, a job search is going to be extremely complicated. When you don't have focus, and when you come into my office and I ask, what is it that you really want to do, and you say, I just want to help people, that's too general, and it's going to be a really hard road for them. And so I really encourage individuals, job seekers, students, whomever I'm working with, to really sit down and think about what it is they truly want to do. What are those job titles? Where do they want to be doing it? Because once you have that information, then the job search is going to be so much easier.
Yeah, I've noticed, with some folks, when they put together their elevator pitch, they will say something to the effect of, I'm looking for any kind of job. I'm really great. And especially I've seen it with younger professionals that are looking for jobs. And I think their purpose is that they want to appear open and flexible, and they, are looking for whatever opportunity will come along. But I think you're right in that it can sometimes close doors.
It does. It's a mistake. And I've had so many alums that said, I'd be more than happy to help students if they would be able to tell me what it is they want to do and where do they want to do it. Generalities are not helpful at all. And so it may be that a job seeker, and I work with a lot of alums that'll come back in and we start from scratch and go back to the assessments and we look at their strengths finder and really kind of figure out what it is they truly want to do. And so we can really start thinking about network opportunities and individuals and actual companies that we can target.
So once you've kind of targeted what it is that someone's looking for, where they want to work, what do you recommend that they do to actually identify a particular job?
Sure. Networking, obviously. I mean, 80% of all jobs and internships are obtained through networking. And so, and again, that's another area that especially students and younger job seekers are lacking. And so that's the first thing, is that they need to create a LinkedIn profile. They need to begin exploring, once they're on LinkedIn, what companies are out there that are going to be able to provide them with the opportunities. I'm a big fan of the Memphis Business Journal book of lists. And so I'll work with students and looking at the top organizations related to their specific interest areas. And we'll start saying, okay, now we're going to go to their websites, and now you're going to go on LinkedIn, and you're going to do a search and see if you know anybody that you're connected to who works with these organizations. And so it's a combination of a lot of different activities. Obviously, we have CareerLink, which is powered through NACELink, which is an online job resource. And so we're always going to encourage students and job seekers, alumni to go there. But the important next step is that once they apply, they have to follow up with a networking lead. And that could be a warm contact, family or friend of someone that they know who works at that organization, or even a not so warm contact of someone that they've worked with or had a project with that they've connected with on LinkedIn, and so following up in that way.
Right. So when it comes to networking, I've spoken to a lot of folks who are just starting to do it. Maybe they've never done it before. Maybe they're really shy. What does networking look like to you, and what sort of recommendations do you have?
It goes back to knowing what you want. In order to have an effective networking meeting or session, you got to know who you are. You have to know what you bring to the table. You have to know what your strengths, your values are. You have to know what it is that you're really looking for, because in order to have that effective elevator speech, you have to be able to say, this is who I am, this is what I've done, and this is what I'm looking for, and this is how you can help me.
Right.
And if you don't have those key points, then it's not going to be an effective networking opportunity. And so, I'll have students and job seekers practice their elevator speech and kind of fill in the blanks ahead of time with an outline of, okay, this is what I've done, this is what stands out about me and in comparison to other applicants or candidates or people that they may be talking with, and then what it is that I actually want to be doing. I want to be a marketing executive. I want to be an occupational therapist. What is it that you're wanting to do? And with networking, even if it's individuals who are at the early part of their job search, and maybe they still have education to finish before they jump into that career, then your request is going to be, can I get more information?
Right.
Or who else can you connect me to, as opposed to, do you have any job leads
for me? So do you recommend that people go to like a networking event where they socialize?
Definitely, if they're prepared first. And so if I'm working with someone who's a senior or a junior for that matter, who has never really networked, but they don't know themselves and know what they want to do, that it could be a disaster. But I am a fan of networking events, and I encourage students to go. We had several students go to the Biz Women Mentor event a few weeks ago, and students actually came back with some internship opportunities as a result of going and networking. But we did give them some guidance before they went out and made sure that they, again, had their elevator speech down and they had a clear direction. And every one of those students who came back with a possible lead, they had a direction, and they know what they wanted, and they were very focused and specific.
Did they take anything with them to the event?
They did. They took a Padfolio with resumes and a pen, and they were able to, some of them had some business cards, some of them did not. Obviously, the professionals who have been out in the world a little bit more, hopefully going to have some business cards. But then the important thing that we always tell students and any job seeker is to collect business cards. Yeah. And then a trick is, not immediately while you're in front of the individual, but within some short frame of time, on the back of that business card, write down the event that you met that person, a few elements of the conversation, and so when you go back and follow up, you'll be able to kind of help them remember who you were, and help them kind of help you.
I think that's such a good tip, because it's so hard when you're at an event to remember all these different people, but it's great because when you remember some specific detail, the person feels like it's a real connection.
You're right. You're exactly right.
Yeah, they're much more likely, I think, to help you if you take that trouble. So you work with a lot of students who are just starting out, and maybe they've got a great education, but they haven't actually had experience. Say they want to do marketing, and they've got a marketing degree, but very little experience in marketing, just as an example. What advice do you give them to kind of get started? Like, how do they even get that first door open?
Yeah, well, hopefully before they've reached graduation, they have completed some type of internship experience. The most important thing that any student, be it adult student or traditional age student, can do at an institution of higher education is complete an internship. It's vital, it's critical. And it's a great way for organizations to be able to hire individuals to allow them to learn and to develop and expand what they're learning inside of the classroom, outside of the classroom. And it's great for organizations because they're going to be able to have someone who's so eager to learn and someone that they can mold and someone that they could potentially turn into a possible hire. But it's great for students and recent grads because it's going to be a great way for them to gain experience. Now, there are labor laws, and nowadays a lot of organizations are requiring that students receive academic credit. And so this may be that some students who are graduating, they may need to take an additional semester in order to be able to get that internship.
Okay.
Or maybe they go on and get some secondary education somewhere else and are able to obtain credit for that internship. But every organization is different. So internships are key and critical. But another way that they can gain experience is through even an externship. An externship's a short, 1 or 2 week experience where students go out and maybe do some shadowing and informational interviews within an organization. And that can go on their resume, but it can develop contacts, but it also can give them some experience as well.
So for the externship, how do you go about getting an externship?
Sure. And so at CBU in particular, we have an externship program for
great.
winter break and for spring break. And so during those breaks, we reach out to all of our alumni and say, hey, are you willing to host a student? And if so, let us know, and then we make a match. And so, for example, FedEx Aircraft Engineering, we have several alums there, and so we always send our engineering students out there during winter and spring break, and they spend about a week. And I've had students who've gotten internships based on their externships. And so an externship's great, and even for individuals who are not in school, who are still looking, employers love talking about what they do and sharing their knowledge. And so even approaching it from, hey, I really like what you're doing. I'd love to come in and do an informational interview, possibly even conduct an externship for a couple of days just to see what a typical day is like for you.
Do you find that the employer has heard of an externship? Like, do they know what that is, or do you have to kind of help them?
You have to kind of help them. And it could be where you say it's kind of more of an extended informational interview. Most employers are familiar with an informational interview. The externship's a little bit more intense in that there's usually a 2 or 3 day time frame at least, and there's more shadowing, and they attend meetings, and they actually kind of serve as a shadow for that organization. But again, that goes back to the networking. And I would never encourage someone to just make a random call and say, hey, can I come extern with you? Unless they know that organization or that employer first. And so finding a network, finding a contact that could kind of get you in the door to establish an externship opportunity, I think that's a great way to gain some experience.
Oh, that's a great suggestion. You mentioned how important internships are a couple of times. Do you find that there's things that a student would need to do to get an internship that's different than getting a full-time job?
Sure. With an internship, there are 2 different routes, and this is at most institutions. There are paid internship opportunities and there are academic credit internship opportunities. Paid internship opportunities do not fall within the academic internship parameters, and so students do not necessarily have to receive academic credit for those. Those are listed, for example, on career links. A lot of organizations and company websites list their internship programs. Many of your larger firms across the country have internship programs for students. The academic internship program is a little different in that we actually match the students. And so I have a list of over 180 approved internship sites across the Memphis area. And so students will look through the list of approved sites, identify what their top interest areas are, best sites that they really want to intern with, and then I'll match them based on their interests, their experience, and what I know about that particular site. And then so I do the work for the student.
Oh, wow, that's great.
And then now with any internship, those students have to prepare.
Yeah.
They have to know the organization. They have to know what the internship description is going to be. They need to go in and interview just as you would a job. And they have to treat the internship as though it is a job because it is a job. And so they have to be professional. They have to dress according to company protocol.
Absolutely.
They have to put the cell phone away. They have to be focused and take initiative and really pay attention to detail and really put forth their best work. Because a big misconception is that an internship is just, it's just an internship. It's not going to matter in my future. But a lot of times internships lead to full-time jobs. And,
absolutely.
And those supervisors, they're going to serve as references for you later on down the road. And so it's very critical that we stress to anyone who's doing an internship that it is actually a job.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Do you ever see, I know it's a small segment of the people that you work with, but you mentioned that you have students who've graduated that are now professionals and they come back to work with you. Do you ever see those people, do they do internships or do they do externships when they're maybe like making a big career shift?
Yeah. I have had some that went back and have done internships as they have gone back to school. And so they may go back in and get an MBA and then they'll do an internship, or they may decide to enroll in Southwest or a community college to get some more technical skills and then do an internship through that. As long as the internship is paid, however, and they're willing to take more of a part-time level position, then that is fine too, and they can get that experience. A lot of individuals, younger professionals who have graduated, will do what's called a gap year, and they'll take some time off, maybe even after they've been in the professional world for a while, just to kind of gain some clarity. And maybe that's travel, maybe it's interning abroad or volunteering abroad, just a way to build that experience that's unique on your resume and to also gain some clarity. Because people change careers 5 to 7 times in their life. And so sometimes people realize one day that this is not really what I want to be doing, so how do I get to where I want to be? And that could involve career counseling, and a lot of times it does. I'll work with several alums that come in who just need to hit the drawing board again and figure out what it is they're really supposed to be doing because they're not happy where they are. And then once that piece is accomplished and we get some ideas, then it could be internships, it could be informational interviews, it could be externships to get some experience in order for them to get their foot in the door. It could be going back to school and getting a completely different degree. And that happens quite often, actually. And then that's good because if they go back to school and get a different completely degree, that opens up a lot of opportunities for internships for those individuals.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that people change jobs so often in their career, or they change career paths so often in their lives. I think that this is somewhat of a newer phenomenon that maybe our parents or grandparents didn't experience. So I've noticed, I've talked with a lot of people who they almost feel bad about it at first, that they're switching careers because it feels like they failed. But I do think it's just much more normal, and it's almost expected sometimes.
It is expected. And actually, if someone has been somewhere for so long where they're stagnant and have not moved up, it actually looks bad.
You're right.
On their resume. So if it may be an opportunity for an organization to provide someone with advancement within that firm, and if that's the case and they're showing progression on their resume, then that's wonderful. But if they've been at the same role for 5 or more years, it's time to really think about, is there an opportunity here or do I need to move out?
Right, absolutely. It can lead to some negative questions later, for sure. Well, you mentioned LinkedIn earlier, and I just wanted to kind of get your perspective on how important your online presence in general is to your job search. And I bet this is something that you talk about a lot with your students.
Definitely. Online presence is critical. Anytime I've ever hired anyone, I always Google search them. And most employers do that. I can't think of one employer that doesn't do that. And so you need to make sure that whatever the results are, that they're positive and that they're professional. Because once it's out there, it's out there. And I could tell you some horror stories of individuals that I've searched, and was very surprised actually at what I found on through their Facebook feeds or some other things. And so online presence is very important, and I always recommend that students use something called Repler.com, and so they can actually get an idea about how professional their online presence is. It'll look through Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and actually give the individual notification if there's any questionable content on there, so they can go in and clean it up immediately.
That's great.
Yeah, it's a really good tool, and it's completely free. So Repler is very important. I also think with online presence, it's very important that one does not confuse Facebook with LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is a professional platform where it's not time to put your fun photo of yourself.
Right.
It is not time to just randomly blanket individuals to make connections as you might would on Facebook. And so that's an educational area for our students to make sure that they're professional in how they connect with employers, professional in how they follow employers and to be strategic and not just following every random organization like you might would on Facebook, because it's a completely different platform. And so online image is critical, but to make sure that one uses it correctly and effectively is also essential.
So do you recommend that your students have a photo on LinkedIn?
I definitely believe that they should have a photo on LinkedIn, because if I'm looking at somebody and there's no photo, I'm automatically thinking, why do they not have a photo on there?
Right.
Or why is there this random silhouette? So I always encourage a photo. I always encourage a professional photo, not a photo op with you and your buddy, not a photo op at a party, a professional headshot. Hopefully someone's wearing a suit or at least professional attire and basically shoulders up. We actually offer headshots in our office anytime during the day. If anybody
that's so great.
Yeah, anybody wants to come in, we'll do a headshot in our office and send that to them. We promote LinkedIn headshots during our career expos because students are already dressed up anyway, and so before or after they come out of the expo, we'll take their picture for them and send
that's
them
very
those shots.
exciting.
Yeah.
So in terms of social media, you mentioned, you don't want anything negative, like on your Facebook and things. What kinds of things do you teach students to kind of avoid? What are the...
Pictures, any questionable pictures. And I know that you can go in and work on your profile settings, but to be very careful and monitor always. And when you're out there at a party, especially our students, do not let people take pictures of you if you are doing something questionable, if you're holding a beer in your hand, or if you have a crazy Halloween costume on. Just don't let it happen. You have to think in advance. And I think that's one of the most important areas is your pictures and what you're tagged in, and to make sure that there's nothing out there that's questionable. And then, of course, to be cognizant and aware of what you like and who you're following. Because if it's an organization that, again, is controversial and it might look bad upon the organization that's exploring you as a potential hire, that could hurt you as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I like to think of interviewing almost like being at a dinner party where you really never know who you're going to meet or what their views might be. So I just like to sort of keep things very neutral so that we can focus on, my skills and what I do well, and not distract with other things that are kind of irrelevant in that moment.
It's so important.
Well, I know, you mentioned you take these professional headshots and the students come really dressed up at the career fair. What do you recommend that they wear to interviews?
Sure. Suits always. I do not care what industry someone is interviewing in. You always want to look the part. You always want to dress as though that you care. And you dress for the job that you want, not the job that you currently have. And so I am always going to encourage students, or any job seeker for that matter, to wear a suit. If you don't have a suit, go buy a plain basic black suit that you can be your interview suit that you can wear, and mix it up with a blouse or a camisole. Or gentlemen, find a good tie. We actually have a career clothes closet that's ongoing, and twice a year we take alumni donations and we stock it with suits. So our students and alumni who need a suit, they can go to our clothes closet and pick something out and take it. So
that's so nice.
Yeah.
Well, what about if somebody's going to an interview on a Friday and you just know that everyone's going to be in jeans?
Suit. Regardless. They're not going to say, wow, that person's too overdressed, I can't believe it. But they will say, oh my gosh, I can't believe that person came in wearing jeans to an interview. And I'm always going to encourage individuals to wear darker colored suits. I would never come in a nice white suit for an interview, regardless of the season, and to be cognizant of their shoes.
So tell me about that.
Yes, open-toed shoes are a no-no for an interview, and clean shoes are a necessity for an interview. People notice shoes, and if there's dirt on your shoes or if they're not clean, someone's going to pay attention to that. So closed-toe shoes for obviously males and females. Again, I've seen some horror stories in my day. Jewelry is very important to address as well, and there's a 5-point rule where you don't need to have more than 5 points of jewelry on your body. And so earrings would count as 2 points, maybe a ring is 3, so you got to be careful. Watch is 4, what's left, because you don't want to go in there with a lot of jewelry on, several rings, several earrings, piercings. Take them out. Do not go in with piercings. And being clean shaven. I actually had a financial management group come in and do some interviews last week, and one of the candidates, great candidate, good experience, good resume, he was not clean shaven, and that cost him the job.
Wow, that's tough. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a hard sort of message sometimes to give, but it's so important because oftentimes, the interview is not always about your skills. Typically, if you get the interview, you're qualified skill-wise based on your resume. You're going in because they're judging your personality and they're judging the fit. Definitely. And a lot of that happens just the first few moments when they meet you.
Yeah.
So do you recommend, this is a question I get pretty often, do you recommend that women wear skirts or pants?
Depends on the industry. And so I always encourage any job seeker to go to the organization's website and kind of get a sense. What are you seeing? Are you seeing a lot of skirt suits? Are you seeing a lot of pantsuits? Financial industry, accounting industry, that's going to be a little bit more conservative. I'm always going to err on the side of caution and tell ladies to wear a skirt suit. Nonprofit industry, education, I mean, I wear a pantsuit. I wear pantsuits to my interviews. And so really that does kind of depend on the industry. But at the end of the day, I want people to feel comfortable during their interview.
Right.
And so if they're going to feel more comfortable and perform better in a pantsuit, then no one's going to say, oh my gosh, they have a pantsuit on as opposed to a skirt suit. So go with the pantsuit. It's an individual preference, I believe. But if ladies do wear a skirt suit, then they are going to need to wear the pantyhose.
That was my next question.
They can't go in bare-legged with a skirt suit. And so you're going to have to just get kind of the Kate Middleton, really nice sheer pantyhose.
Yeah.
If you hate pantyhose, but yeah, you will have to wear the pantyhose.
And what about, do you talk to students at all about their makeup?
Yes. Less is more. It's not a party that you're going to. It's not an evening event. It's an interview. And so you have to go, again, more conservative in your makeup. I mean, if you wear makeup, great. If you don't wear makeup, that's fine too. But you need to go in looking, again, presentable and professional because you only get one chance to make a first impression.
Oh, absolutely.
No bright red lipstick, heavy on the eyeliner, heavy on the eyeshadow is never a good thing. And then, of course, with your hair, with ladies' hair, if they have longer hair, I'm always going to encourage them to wear it back in a ponytail.
Oh, I totally agree. I totally agree because it really draws attention away from what you're there for. And I've had friends say to me, well, I want them to like me for me. And I'm like, you're not there to make friends. You're there to get a job. And if they're distracted by your hair, by the fact that you haven't shaved, by the fact you haven't brushed your teeth. Right. I mean, whatever it is.
It could affect it.
You don't want that to be the reason that you don't get a job. They can become your friend later if that is appropriate. But in the meantime, you're looking for employment.
Exactly. You're exactly right. And perfume, I would always just say, just do not wear it.
I can't tell you how many conversations I've overheard after an interview where the people who did the interview said, oh, did you see that person? They looked like they were dressed up to go out to a nightclub. Or, wow, I was allergic to their perfume. Right. I could barely be in the room with them.
It's bad.
You don't want to be that person that is being talked about in that way after you leave.
No. And iron your clothes. I had a student who, again, was a great candidate for an internship. He walked in and the recruiter called me and said he was great. His shirt was wrinkled. So yeah, it seems like something so simple. I'm like, really? Do I have to say iron your clothes? So I gotta say iron your clothes now too.
Well, I think that's very helpful.
Yeah.
So when you work with students or just job seekers in general, how do you recommend that they get prepared for an interview? Like they finally got the interview, it's set up, and they're totally nervous. Like what do they do to prepare?
Research. You have to go in knowing the organization. You have to know their mission, their values, what they stand for, know their financial information. Go to Yahoo Financial, search the company, what's going on with them financially. Know their competitors, Glassdoor, Career Search. There's a lot of great resources out there to help the job seeker learn more about not only the organization, what's going on there, but who are their competitors. Because if you go in armed with that information, you're going to really, really impress the interviewer. And so research is critical, vital. I can't stress enough that has to be the first thing. And then the second element, though, is being able to connect your experiences with that company and with that specific job description. So many people will go into the interview without the in-depth knowledge of that job description. The job description tells you what they're looking for. And so I'm always going to tell job seekers to go through the description, highlight the key areas that the organization or employer is looking for, and then go through your resume and make a match. And then that's what you're going to want to talk about in the interview. And you need to go in with stories. You need to prepare for behaviorally based interview questions because that's really what organizations are doing now in these interviews. They're not going to say, tell me about your skills. Or what skills do you have? They're going to say, tell me about a time when you demonstrated blank. And so you have to go in with stories. And we always tell students to come in with that STAR technique where they talk about the situation and the task or the action that they took and then the result. Because employers care about what did you do? What was the result of your initiative and your work? And if you go in with those stories and those solid examples, that's how you're going to wow an employer. And if you're able to make the connection between you and your experience and their mission, then you're going to definitely woo them over.
Oh, I totally agree. I love the point about the stories. I actually, when I was interviewing, I would call, my grandmother or a family member who had a job very different than mine. And I would sometimes tell them some of these stories as practice, because oftentimes in interviews, you may talk to someone who's, say, like the human resources person. They might not know a lot about what you do. So you need to be sure you're able to really clearly communicate and articulate to someone who maybe isn't as focused in that particular area about what you do.
Definitely.
I think the communication is definitely key. So when job seekers go to the interview, they actually, are driving in their car or whatever, they show up. Do you recommend that they get there early? Or
Yes, I actually recommend a drive-by the night before if they have no idea where the organization is, especially if it's here in their hometown. Drive by, make sure you get your route down the night before, get there at least 15 minutes early, be prepared, and be nice to everyone you meet. Again, I have a lot of horror stories. You may think, I don't have to be nice to the administrative assistant. They don't matter. Yes, you do. You need to be nice and kind and shake hands and have good eye contact from the moment you walk into that door to the moment that you leave. It's very important to always be positive and to not be negative. I don't care if there's a tornado outside. To you, it's the best day ever. And you're going to act as though that it is. And I've heard recruiters interview students before, and they're walking down the hall, and the recruiter would say, so how's your day going? And the student would be like, I have so many finals, I'm studying. And the tone of the recruiter changed immediately. And that you knew that the interview was done. It was over. It was done.
Wow.
So always being positive, always being friendly and kind and nice to everyone during that initial introduction phase, and making sure that you're there on time.
What are some of the other things that you think are big mistakes that people make in interviews that could kind of trip things up?
Nonverbals are key. They're critical. And I always tell job seekers that you have to act engaged. You have to show them that you want to be there and that you want the position. And it doesn't mean that you have to go in and act like a cheerleader, but you do have to go in with some personality, and you have to be excited and smile and be lively during the interview, because I've had so many employers that say to me that they really cannot stand it when someone that they're interviewing across the table just acts as though they don't want to be there. They never smile, their eye contact is poor, they slump in their seat, or even if they're nervous and fidgety. And of course, during interviews, people are going to be nervous, but if you go in with confidence and you've done your homework in advance, then your nerves should be a little bit more at ease, and you should perform better. So nonverbals are critical. Sitting up straight, making sure that you have a good eye contact, nodding your head, showing empathy that you're listening, making sure that you're relaxed, making sure that you're leaning forward and demonstrating that you are listening, and then smiling. Smiling, being enthusiastic, being positive, never speaking negatively about a prior employer or a previous experience. And so that's key, and that's where a lot of people make mistakes, is they'll talk bad about a previous employer or a previous job, and that is a no-no. That is extremely taboo.
There are situations during interviews where the interviewer asks questions like, what did you not like about your last job? Why did you leave your last job? Sure. And so what would you recommend if the person had kind of a negative experience and, they want to maybe try to be positive?
Sure. Try and put a positive spin on it as much as you can and prepare for that in advance. And so it could be that, I really got a lot out of the job opportunity. I really felt as though my skills developed, but I realized that in order to be able to grow professionally, it was time for me to move on.
Absolutely.
So that's a really nice standard answer. You never want to get into, I hate my boss was a micromanager. You never want to say anything like that. And I've heard that before. I've heard people say that to me before. And I've also, we did a phone interview for a position at CBU, and somebody said, oh yeah, well, I really want to move to Memphis because my fiance lives there. Done, interview over. it's a professional interview. No one cares about your personal life.
Totally agree. I've interviewed folks before who gave me too much personal information, whether it was about their divorce or whatever. It's, I don't know you. Right. We're not here to talk about that today.
Yeah. Very unprofessional.
It's very uncomfortable. It kind of says, if you're willing to divulge this inappropriate information with me in the first hour that we meet,
right.
What will you be like as an employee months after you've been here? I mean, how much more will you be divulging?
Exactly, and I think the tell me about yourself question, that is where a lot of people get tripped up, especially about the personal information.
Right.
Because they think it's a question to ask, well, I do this, and I love bike riding, and I have 3 kids. No. That's not what it's about. It's about a summary of your resume and why you're sitting in front of them. And so that's a very important area to address too.
I think that question, tell me about yourself, it often happens at the very beginning.
Always.
And I think it can be a great question if you're ready for it.
Yeah.
I think it's a great time to actually deliver your elevator speech.
Exactly.
You may tweak it just a little, but if you've practiced it, that is so great. And if you can just let it roll off, and then you can sort of get more calm and relaxed, and the rest of the interview can, be more natural. That question can be great if you're prepared.
If you're prepared.
But it is not a question about how many children you have,
no,
how many dogs.
No.
Nobody wants to know that.
They do not.
So after the interview is over, what is the thing that you recommend for job seekers to do as a follow-up, if anything?
Sure. Always a thank you. And a lot of people do not realize how important this is, but I'll give another example. So a firm was out interviewing about a week ago, and one of the candidates that I thought was a shoo-in did not send a thank you. And he called me and said, you know what, I'm really disappointed that she did not send a thank you. And I'm really surprised that she didn't, everybody else did. So organizations pay attention to thank you notes. And an old school handwritten thank you note on professional stationery is always the way to go. And I can't stress the importance of that enough. In some situations where an employer may tell you that they're making a decision over the weekend and you don't necessarily have time to send a thank you note, send a thank you note within 24 hours, but then immediately send a thank you email also to make sure that you're on their mind when they're making that immediate decision over the weekend. But I would always encourage thank you notes to anyone who interviewed you. And so not just one person, but if 3 people interviewed you, then you need to send a thank you note to all 3 of those individuals. And so it's so important to get business cards after the interview. Usually organizations and employers will offer that, but if they do not, ask for one and send those thank yous. And in your thank you note, it can't be general. And there needs to be specific information about what you talked about during your interview. And then you need to reiterate your skills and your experiences that make you the best fit, and avoid weak language. I see weak language a lot in cover letters and in thank you notes. Well, I think I'd be great. No, I know I will be the best fit for this position.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for coming in today. I really appreciate you taking the time. Is there anything else that you'd like to share today?
Sure. I just think in order to be successful in life, you have to know who you are first. And so I can't stress enough that first step in the job search process, which is self-reflection and focus, and making sure that you know what it is you truly want to do, because if you know what you want to do, then you'll be able to obtain the tools to get there.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you
so much. It was great to see you. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Tune in next week for another edition of Copeland Coaching Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Copeland Coaching Podcast today with your host, Angela Copeland. Tune in next time to get more great tips on turning your job search into a slam dunk.